Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Assemblyman Robert Smullen. I'm very glad that everyone is here to talk about the biggest financial issue that's going to affect New York State in the coming years. It's a cost that's totally avoidable, $10 billion at a minimum with a B, $10 billion with a B, to be able to do the very same things that we're already doing for our students, which is to take them to school, which is something that's very, very important to everyone in New York State. But what we've done is we've legislated a path forward that's unsustainable, that we simply cannot use as a state, as a model for what to do. And our purpose today is to talk about, at this press conference, to be able to talk about this issue which is going to affect our state. There's a deadline that's approaching. It's only in 2 years from now that all school districts are going to be forced, mandated, to have to buy electric school buses. And if we don't address this financial barrier is going to crush our school districts, particularly those in the rural areas that I happen to represent. That's because these school districts are going to be buying buses that are 2 to 4 times more expensive, and that doesn't even include the infrastructure cost. As I mentioned, $10 billion with a B. An electric school bus cost, the estimate right now is almost $400,000. That's $250,000 more than the buses that we buy today. And the fact is that even the Office of General Services says that these buses are unavailable at this point. The market hasn't responded to this call for reducing carbon emissions through legislative fiat. And it's going up. Over the past 2 years, the bus prices have gone up almost 9%, whereas inflation is only 6%. So what's happening here is just economics. And the worst thing about it is that utility costs are actually going up as well. In the past 2 years, electricity costs have gone up 15%. With increased demand on the grid from the Climate Leadership and the Community Protection Act, it's only going to go up. Electricity costs are going to double. So at the same time that we are going to buy new school buses, we're actually going to double the electricity costs that are actually going to power them. And there's a fallacy going on that these are zero-emission school buses. There is no such thing as a zero-emission vehicle. The electricity has to come from somewhere. And in this case, the electricity is being produced primarily by natural gas, where you burn natural gas, you transmit it over electric lines, over the grid, and then you store it in a battery. And as any physicist will tell you, there's some problems with that because of the laws of physics. Additionally, the school districts that are going to have to transition to these buses aren't ready. The electricity upgrade, everything that's got to be done, new chargers, new facilities, it's going to be very expensive. And there aren't even enough drivers because it's projected that because of the inefficiency of the electric school buses, we're actually going to have more buses and more drivers to be able to do that. And that's particularly hard in rural areas. So, to avoid this cost, to help the state, to help the taxpayers, to help the parents, to help everybody that's associated with this issue, I'm proposing a very simple bill. There's a mandate that says school districts must buy zero-emission buses. I say allow school districts, allow school boards, allow taxpayers, allow parents to simply opt out of this. And then it becomes an individual choice of all of the school districts, the 700-plus school districts in the state. If they want to buy them, go ahead. If they're ready for them from an infrastructure standpoint, go ahead. But otherwise, allow the school districts to choose. Don't put the school districts in a dilemma of having to say, you have to either fulfill this mandate or lose state funding, or break your tax cap, force a supermajority vote, which, if I'm hearing it correctly from all the people in my district, they're going to vote no on this, and then force them into a constitutional conundrum of either fulfilling a mandate or adhering to the law as it's written. And that's really, it's a very simple proposition. So what we're basically asking for is either an amendment or a new bill that just says school districts can opt out. It's common sense, it makes good fiscal sense, and it's really the right way to do things. Now, this issue has caused consternation across the entire state. And we've got a whole bunch of folks that are here to talk about it today. And first up is Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who's the ranker on our Education Committee. Phil?
You don't want me ranker on education. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Robert, for hosting this very important press conference. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the mother of all unfunded mandates. We're talking about billions of dollars for vehicle replacement, infrastructure investments, and then our school districts are going to have to upgrade their electricity and their infrastructure as well. And that's going to be borne by the property taxpayer. Last year we had a press conference on this issue. The Shenandoah superintendent said it was going to cost them $30 million to do upgrades. That would be borne by their property taxpayers. The Horsehead School District said it would be $10 million, borne by their property taxpayers. You know, last year the governor was asked by the media, should we pause on the electric school bus mandate? Her answer was, well, that's up to the legislature. That is the most ridiculous answer I've heard. She's the one who put this in her budget and passed it. Make no mistake about it. This is all part of a radical energy climate agenda that's unworkable, not feasible, not safe, unreliable, and certainly very, very expensive. The CLCP and other bills like it. Make no mistake about it. It's all part of this plan to dismantle the affordable and reliable natural gas infrastructure supply and delivery system. It's designed to take away consumer choice on how you heat your home, cook your food, power your buildings, and the vehicles you drive. The more people see this, the more people hear about this and learn about it up close, they don't like it and they don't want it. Our school districts don't want it. The trucking industry don't want it with the regulations they're passing. The businesses don't want it. The people don't want it. Whether it's the gas stove ban, all electric buildings, all electric heating, EV cars, EV school buses, which we're talking about here, ACT. We're talking about vehicles, but this is a train wreck heading down the tracks at the public, and many people don't understand it and have no idea. We're putting our eggs on this electrification basket. My colleague, Mr. Smolin, talked about the electricity rates. Right now, in New York State, the residential rate is 24 cents per kilowatt hour. That's 47% higher than the national average. The commercial rate is 19.1 cents per kilowatt hour. That's 44% higher than the national average. So we're going to have more electricity demand. It's just going to increase prices more. And Governor Hochul has talked about affordability. Where does this address the affordability crisis that we have in the state of New York? This school bus mandate was passed in a budget with no cost analysis given, no feasibility study given, no safety analysis, and no ensuring that it's sourced with U.S. parts, materials. And in fact, when I talk about safety, we talk about EV fires, battery storage fires. In Massachusetts recently, they had, earlier this month actually, they had a school bus fire, EV school bus fire. I think there were 4 buses involved. That's what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen. We also have a bill that would deal with this thing. Before we move forward, there would be a feasibility study, a cost analysis, the safety study, working with the Office of Fire Prevention, and making sure the materials that produce the batteries are sourced with the U.S., because we do know, and I've talked about this, my colleagues, you know, cobalt is used to produce a lithium-ion battery. Well documented, children in the Congo are mining these mines to get those materials. They're dying, they're being maimed, they're being paralyzed, and also poisoning water, rivers, and streams in South America in the lithium triangle. So it's like this agenda. It's okay if kids are dying and water, rivers, streams are being polluted in other areas, but if that was happening here, it wouldn't happen. The one thing that's most hypocritical about this bill that drives me crazy, the state of New York mandated that our school districts have to convert their entire fleet by 2035. Do you know when the state of New York has to convert their heavy-duty medium fleet? 2040, a full 5 years later than our school districts. And the state of New York has an out for feasibility and for reliability. How does that make sense to anyone? How about the state of New York go first? How about they work out the quirks. They figure it all out first before we make our property taxpayers spend 1 penny on this social experiment. There's other ramifications from this. The weight. And again, when we talk about diesel school buses, we're talking about near zero emission diesel school buses. A diesel school bus per axle is about 10 tons per axle. An electric school bus, on the front axle is 14 tons, the rear axle is 25 tons. The impact on our local roads, we had a hearing last week on this, and there's a study about to come out. One of the things they said, they would damage the roads 20% quicker. We know about the range issues, increase the per mile cost for maintenance $20,000 to $50,000, increase costs for rehabilitation, for reconstruction $500,000. This is happening too quickly. We need to pause. And even in the budget hearing, I mean, the governor, and I asked the media to ask the governor's office and the speaker this question: why are we making our school districts go first on this? Why doesn't the state of New York do this first? And the governor's office said, well, we have $500 million in the Bond Act, and we have this federal money coming in. During Harris, at the budget last year, when we asked the question, if you combine all that money, there's enough to purchase 3,000 school buses. We have a fleet of nearly 50,000 school buses. So the rest of that is going to be borne by the property taxpayers of this state. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is the right bill. Give the choice to our school districts. Give them the choice to opt in. If they want to do it, great. Don't mandate it on them. Make the state of New York go first. And as we move forward with this, and with our energy plan, we need to make sure it's feasible. We need to make sure it's reliable. We need to make sure it's safe. And we need to make sure it's affordable. We need to pump the brakes on this thing right now. Actually, we need to slam the brakes on this thing. The governor should realize that and hope she addresses some of these questions. And let's make New York go first. Again, let's not make our school districts, our local property taxpayers, be the guinea pig for this social experiment that's not worked, that's not feasible, and is really problematic if you just have to talk to them. So thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate the time to be here, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. So next up, I've got Assemblyman Scott Bendett. Scott? Leaders lead. Thank you, Colonel Smullen, for proposing this legislation. I'm a small business owner, and I subscribe to a different philosophy than our governor. I come from a place where we go ready, aim, fire, not fire, ready, aim. And that's what's happened with this proposal for this electric bus mandate. In my district, I have one school district that has participated in this program, and one of the most views on Facebook was when the electric bus broke down and had to be towed by a gasoline tow truck. This is a policy that is unaffordable, unreliable, and unattainable. We don't want it. Our school districts don't want it. My own personal school district just had to go through a $500,000 project to change their name from the Warriors, because they didn't let them use the name Warriors. But it was fine on the highway sign for them to go and ask for road warriors to plow our roads in New York State. We're sick of it. We're sick of these mandates. We need the governor to step in and put a pause on this. We don't want it. It's unaffordable, it's unattainable, and it's unfair for the citizens to have to pay for this. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, thanks so much, Assemblymember Bendett. This is a big issue for a lot of our rural districts. So next up is Assemblyman Matt Simpson. Matt?
Thank you, Assemblyman Smullen. This is so important. I just spent this summer visiting all of my schools, and a couple of my superintendents are here today. And the common theme that I heard is that they were working diligently on accomplishing this goal, this aspirational goal set by the legislature. What they found is the supply to the North Country isn't even adequate enough to provide enough energy to supply these EV buses. And if the school district was to go forward with that project, it was going to cost them millions of dollars to just upgrade the entrance into their facility. These costs are astronomical. Many of the superintendents told me that runs that are currently covered by one bus are now going to require two buses. A bus in the morning and a different bus in the afternoon because of the charge times and the cycle times on these EV buses. This is unproven in the rural North Country school districts, and we need a pause. It isn't that our school districts are not looking at an effective way to implement this. There isn't a way to do it. There is no help from New York State. You know, we have grants, we have billions of dollars, millions that the state is appropriating towards this, and at what cost? Isn't the primary function of government is to educate our children? Look at the billions of dollars that are being put into a program that doesn't even have a feasibility study that addresses these challenges that our superintendents are bringing to us. And now we're at a stalemate because these proposals are going on a ballot, and who has the say? The taxpayers at this point, and they vote down that proposal for a new EV bus. We've asked, what happens then? Does the school district still have to comply with this mandate? There's no answers. I think that there isn't a member here in the legislature that doesn't understand that this isn't going to work, which proves my point. This is purely aspirational. It's a narrative that's being put out there. There isn't any scientific, there isn't any study, any engineering that has been done to support this program. And we need to stop it now before it gets out of hand. This is coming at a cost of education. Last year, the governor proposed a budget that would cut foundation aid. This year, we have a new formula that's going to affect some districts positively, some negatively. Why isn't that a higher priority than trying to meet a mandate that's impossible to meet in New York State? The education of our children is a primary function of our superintendents and school districts, and we need to stand up for them. So that's why this legislation is needed. We need to push and make sure this happens immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Assemblymember Simpson. Next up is our great Senate partner, stands up for upstate New York, Senator Joe Griffo. Come on up, Senator.
Well, this is a good backdrop here. I like this, right? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Senator Smullen, to all of my colleagues here in the Assembly. Pleased to introduce this bill in the Senate, too, because we're trying to bring common sense back to the Capitol. And really, when you look at this, it becomes an affordability and a reliability issue for many of these school districts across the state. Many of us have always talked about the unfunded mandates and how we need to relieve those mandates and the burden that they place upon our local governments and school districts. But in this particular issue, we know we can find ways to preserve and protect our environment and also to continue to be mindful of our economy and the effect it has on local governments and school districts. So again, to me, it's just basic. You have a number of utility providers who are indicating they're unable to provide adequate power to districts. You have fiscal challenges that these school districts are already facing. And some of these vehicles, these buses, will not be conducive to long bus routes and weather conditions, particularly when you look at some of the upstate communities. So all of that together, I think, you know, essentially we definitely want this opportunity for them to opt out, but there should also be a moratorium on this right now as we move forward on this legislation. So, Assemblyman, proud to be a co-sponsor with you. Thank you all again so much, and thank you all for allowing us to call attention to this again and try to restore common sense to the Capitol.
Thank you so much, Senator. So now we're going to shift a little bit and talk about common sense. We're going to have some of our superintendents speak, and you'll get an idea of what's happening there. First is Dr. Nick Fitzgerald. He's the superintendent of Canajoharie Central School. Nick.
Thank you, Assemblyman Smullen. We appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak on the behalf of the school district of Canajoharie. We went through a study recently. I got our information back in terms of what this would take for our district. Well, we think the general concept is a good idea overall. It's not feasible financially for us right now. We would be looking at $3.2 million of infrastructure costs to start. We'd also be looking at another study with National Grid to see if power could even get to that level. And not to mention, our study came back that 5 of our bus runs would not be able to, with the current technology, meet the specifications. In addition to that, we're in the far end of the section for athletics, and if we had to take a trip to one of the local schools or schools outside of the Albany region, we'd be looking at 80 to 100 miles on one trip, one way. which would be almost impossible for for us to get there. So I know the technology will get better over time, but we deal in not maybes, we deal in absolutes. We have to get our kids to school every day. We have to get our kids to sporting events and field trips, and we can't be halfway and find out this doesn't work. So a pause would help us immensely, gather more information, data, and put our financial situation in place to make this happen. We also lease buses, so every 5 years we have new buses that come in to make sure that we have the best for our students. This would now go into 8 to 12 years, which would affect our leasing and our financing and our reserves. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to this. But again, I'd like to thank Senator Smolin on this, because this is a huge roadblock for us coming up within 2 years. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Next up, from one of our greatest small cities, Gloversville, is Dave Halloran. He's the superintendent of Gloversville and Large School District. Dave?
Thank you, Assemblyman Smolin. Yeah, I won't reiterate a lot of the reasons why this pause is needed, but I'll tell a couple personal stories about Gloversville. Gloversville, those who know the city of Gloversville, it's a nice little city in the southern Adirondacks. We have a number of challenges in Gloversville, including poverty, transiency, homelessness, and unfortunately, generational educational apathy. Therefore, our Board of Education has elected to provide transportation to city residents because people are not getting their children to school. We had to close a number of neighborhood elementary schools, so in order to help families get their children to the schools, the board has elected to provide 3 buses in the city of Gloversville to get children elementary and secondary to school. We get that without aid on those runs, so the district spends local dollars to do that. With a $450,000 price tag on these buses, we would have to cease that practice. What costs us now, roughly $600,000, would be $1.5 million, and that's something that we are not able to sustain. So that's just an example of why this is a bad idea. And the other thing is, our Board of Education would say, Dave, put it up. The government tells you you need to do this. Put the, we have a capital reserve for our school buses. We purchase 2 to 4 buses per year, and our community overwhelmingly supports it year after year. When you put a price tag that's now $1.5 million annually to purchase 3 buses, the community will no longer support that, and we will be out of compliance with a mandate that is flawed to begin with. So I won't reiterate a lot of the great reasons that have already been mentioned as to why this is a bad idea, sustainability. Just another story is our mechanics told me I have no interest in working on electric buses. I like the combustible engine. That's what I got into for a reason, and I will seek employment elsewhere. And those colleagues behind me, I'm sure, will tell you, finding qualified people in various aspects of school district management, from teaching to food services to cleaning to maintenance to bus drivers and bus mechanics, is difficult in the current climate to find. You continue changing something and ask people to start working on something that they did not sign up for 2 decades ago, they will move to the private sector and find employment elsewhere. So we ask for the reprieve that's being asked for from our representatives. I appreciate the representatives here, and especially our own Assemblyman, Mr. Small. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Next up, we've got Superintendent Andrew Cook. Andy?
Thank you, Assemblyman. I'm proud to stand here on behalf of the Hartford Central School District and the 31 component school districts of the Warren, Washington, Saratoga, Hamilton, Essex County BOCES. And as has been said, as a school district, we're trying to adhere to the mandate. We're doing our due diligence and research to see how we can make 2027 and 2035 possible. And the more information we find, the harder and almost impossible nature of the task is becoming on us. My district has recently completed a study where we will have to purchase 30% additional buses just to accommodate our normal AM and PM bus runs. And then we'll have to purchase buses specifically for any run beyond that. So any of our sports trips, any of our field trips, any of our extracurricular activities are going to have additional buses, because the capacity of the zero admission buses that we purchase won't be able to accommodate both our AM, PM runs and then our normal runs. And another point that really hasn't been discussed is that busing no longer is from home to school. Our students are involved in so many unique and different programs, whether it's an exceptional learner program for a student with disabilities, or an early college in the classroom program, or a CTE program. Our school districts are busing students all throughout the region in order to provide them with the best educational experience possible. With the zero admission bus mandate, having to look at the miles and the capacity of those vehicles to be able to transport our students just to their basic functions is a monumental task that we're not going to be able to do. And so we're going to have serious conversations on the local level of what programs and opportunities we're going to be able to provide for our students moving forward. One good example is our FFA just went to the national convention in Indianapolis. It's a wonderful learning experience, leadership academy for our students that they value every single year. That would have to cease. We would not be able to provide that opportunity because there's no way we could transport students from Hartford, New York to Indianapolis on a zero admission bus unless there were charging stations all throughout that corridor, and then we're asking our chaperones to stop with students at rest stops and sit there and wait for hours on end to charge the vehicles just to go back and forth. So in addition to all the excellent points that my colleagues have made and that our legislative representatives have made, we really need to look at how this is going to impact directly the students and the educational experiences that we're able to provide them if this is moving forward. I think this proposal of a common sense proposal is a great idea. Allow those school districts who are ready and want to join in, and those school districts that might need a little bit more time or their communities are not behind it, allow them to continue with their current practice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we've got Tom McGraw from Randall.
Granville.
Yeah, Granville. Thank you, Tom.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to take the time to talk about what everybody's already spoken about on the unworkableness of this mandate. But I think that the governor should think very seriously. Though it is a good idea in the future, it is incredibly unpopular in rural areas. I represent the Granville Central School District, and we are a very rural area. In-district runs would be near impossible. Out-of-district runs would be equally challenging. I don't often speak for the voters in my district, but I could say unequivocally, if put to a vote right now to move forward with purchasing EV buses, it would resoundingly fail, not by any small margin whatsoever. And I say that with all confidence. This is something legislatively that makes a lot of sense, finally. As superintendents, we're not against progress. We're not against looking at this. However, moving forward on something that we are simply technology-wise not ready, the grid is not ready to support, at least in our area, the power needs that we would have. There needs to be at best a pause to give us time to work through this. Thank you.
Well, that really says it all. You know, the superintendents, the legislators, the people, you know, particularly in the rural areas, we can avoid statewide this $10 billion cost by just letting the will of the people in that school district be followed. It's democracy at its finest. It's the easiest way to do it, and it'll solve the issue going forward as to what's the most efficient way to get to the future that New York State should get to.